Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Victor. Welcome everyone to the first episode of the Questioning Regeneration series. Really excited to have you all here and to launch this series of online webinars. So today's episode will be specifically on the questions that are surrounding the sphere of weaving and mapping the regenerative ecosystem. We have some really beautiful people with us here today. I will be co-facilitating this session with my beautiful colleagues, Victor, here for me at least, Simon down there, and Hira and Dipal. It's quite a few of us, so I will not do and invite everyone to do a full round of introduction, but instead I will ask you all to write in the chat. So you can write your name, where you're speaking from today, and share any links that are relevant to your work today, either your personal work, organizations you're involved with, founding, co-founding, whatever it is that you wanna share with the community today. And as you all do that, I will hand over to Victor, who is the instigator of the Gathering of Tribes, to share a little bit more about this event that we're all co-creating with you.
Hi, thank you. So the Gathering of Tribes, as probably most of you know, because you're here, is we're bringing together tribes. Use the word tribes partially as to be inclusive, because it could be any kind of organization or non-organization. Anybody who says that they're a tribe, we say, yes, great, please come. But it's also an invitation to think of what is a tribe mean in the 21st century? You know, what does belonging mean? That's one key part of it. It's our tagline is connect for action. So we really want people to come together, to learn, to have great conversations, but also come out of the gathering with new connections, whether it's new members for their tribes, new projects, business, law, any kind of connection. We really want to be a catalyst for this movement, because we see the regenerative movement as beautiful and growing, but we need much more horizontal connection, collaboration, and we really see the regenerative mind widely. So please come. It's in nature. Also, I really think that a regenerative festival needs to be in nature. And it's co-created, because a festival is a microcosm of creating a society. And I really believe in a co-created, the regenerative society will be a co-created society. So yeah, come, let's play, let's experiment together.
Great.
Simon.
Thank you, Victor.
Okay, thank you very much, Victor. Right. Okay, so just a word of explanation of what we're doing here today, because obviously just picking up this idea of connection. The Gathering of Tribes is going to be a place where people connect, and we want to help people to find a vocabulary for connection, sort of the words around which to connect. But there's a challenge here, because everybody uses these words in slightly different ways. And when we were trying to put together this list of themes for the gathering, we came across lots and lots of different slight variations and so forth. So we were thinking, okay, let's not focus on the words and the terms, because people disagree about those. Let's try and find the questions underlying this. So, and so what we're trying to do today is to see if we can allow these questions to emerge, because what brings people together, in my experience, is the inquiry around shared questions. So and that will bring a sort of dynamic to the gathering itself. Now, it's not a beauty contest who has the best question. This is something to do with letting the questions emerge, sensing into the questions and letting the questions emerge in the dialogue between us. And in order to find those questions, we will need to be listening deeply to each other's concerns, passions, issues, all that kind of thing. So, what we're doing today is, in order to allow the dialogue to flow, we'll be doing a fishbowl, and we'll be coming on to that in a minute after the initial round. But first, do we have? This is a question to my co-facilitators here. Do we have a? Have we got enough for initiators to actually set the scene at the moment?
We do.
Okay, over to you then, Audrey, to invite them to set the scene.
So, as Simon said, the session is very much open to everyone, and we will have a fishbowl conversation where you're all invited to join in and bring your questions and your ideas. But we have today Brad from Tribalize and Regen Week, and I'm sure many other things, Brad, that you can talk about, and Steve Melville as well, who is joining us and who is a founding member of Evolutionary Enterprises. Brad and Steve are our what we call initiators today. The initiators are basically those people who work directly and really at depth in the field that we're looking at in the episode. So in this case, really mapping again and weaving the ecosystem of regeneration. And we've invited you basically to kickstart the conversation today. So to give a little bit of energy by bringing your own questions. So Brad, if that's okay, we'll start with you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I will if you want to share a little bit more about, well, yeah, again, what questions are really alive today in your work? What do you want to bring to this space, basically?
Okay, thank you, and welcome to everybody. I'm in southern Mexico right now, but before that I was from California, and I'm addicted to co-creation, I like to say. I like bringing people together, I like hosting events, and I like building community. And Victor and I met through Rebuild, and I produced a conference for the last 7 years called Tribalize. And this year we're actually focusing entirely on the social innovation, social technologies that build coherence in a group. So I've been thinking a lot about this and programming a conference during Regen Week, which will be in Tulum, March 21st through the 28th. So I often start my co-creation endeavors with the question, what is our collective intention? And that's not always asked in a space. We've gotten into this thing, what's your individual intention? And if you have a bunch of people with individual intentions, you have a form of chaos. Of course, we all have our life paths, our own fates and destinies, and our own sacred purpose on this planet. But if we're coming into a co-creation together, it is really, what is our collective intention? What are we all bringing those gifts to? And so that's the main question. And then I have a metaphor for the kind of visualization of what that means. And if any of you have ever put up a teepee, you know it's a ceremony. And that ceremony has pole carriers bringing poles and putting them into place. But what is set is a tripod of 3 poles that are put into place by, let's call them the instigators. And then everybody else brings their pole and puts it into place. And then there's a bundle tied at the very top. And then there's a wrapping of the canvas on top of that. So if you think about that, there's a collective intention and a very strong tripod set, and then everybody else gifts, contributes to the larger structure, and then a beautiful wrapping gets put upon it. So for me, if that's not really at the core center of an endeavor or an event or a movement, there's going to be some discord that will come from the lack of a proper foundation. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Brad. Yeah, love the metaphor, like Nicole, super interesting. Steve, I'm gonna turn towards you now to, well, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more and also bring forward what are those questions that are like for you? I think you're on mute. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm just sort of settling in here. Sorry, I was unable to join until a bit late, but yeah, my name is Steve Melville. I'm calling in from Boulder, Colorado. I have a long career in technology, but my heartbreak over my sense of where we're all headed as a civilization compelled me to commit myself to fostering an evolutionary shift. And the good news is I see lots of people, lots of organizations who seem to be similarly activated. And yet my sense is that there's still a lot of silos and a lot of disconnection between all the people that are on the forefront of this shift. So my calling really was to leverage technology background to try and manifest a platform that could help foster collaboration and co-creation across these silos. I want to be clear, it's not because I think technology is the answer. I think technology needs to be in service to life. And really, it's our coming together as humanity and recognizing our fundamental oneness and getting past the meme of separation that is the key here. But we all have our own gifts and our own weaknesses and our own strengths. And because I happen to have some background in building large-scale platforms, that's what I felt called to do. I'm also involved in a project called the Planet Project. It's not a technology project at all, but its thesis is that the many existential risks we face are a function of cultural stage, a stage of consciousness that we've been manifesting for about 5,000 years. And I won't go into why that interval, but the point is we've been acting out this sort of worldview for a long time. It's not just the last 50 years or 100 years or 500 years, but we are on the cusp of a major shift. And the way it's going to happen is not by treating all the symptoms, but by really being clear on the root cause, which is this cultural shift, and what can we do to accelerate the shift to a culture that recognizes the fundamentally interconnected, interdependent, and interrelated nature of all reality. And so the questions that are alive for me have to do with how can we accelerate the cultural shift? But the question I might throw out for this group is, what are the barriers that are arising for you? As we all are making our attempts to make a difference, what are the barriers that you're encountering in being able to fully express your creative innovation?
Thank you so much, Steve. That is a beautiful segue into the next part of the conversation, which is to open it, as I said earlier, into a fishbowl format. Can I get a show of hands? Has anyone not heard or not practiced fishbowl conversation before? Okay, we almost have a fishbowl experts session. So I'll just explain very quickly, and I'll explain specifically how we will do it through Zoom, because it's usually practiced in person. I'm sure we'll have loads of those at the gathering. So a fishbowl conversation, and Simon, please jump in. A fishbowl conversation is a conversation where you basically have 3, 4, or 5, it depends, people who are sitting in a circle on chairs in the middle, and then you have everyone else who is sitting around them, basically. Those people who are sitting in the core circle are the ones who are having a conversation. They're having a dialogue. There's usually one empty chair in this core circle, and anyone can join the conversation at any time. Those people who are on the outer circle are just listening in. They're not actively partaking in the conversation. The idea is that the people in the first circle, once they are done basically sharing what they thought was meaningful, they just stand up and leave and move on to the outer circle. So the way we will practice this in this virtual space is that I will ask everyone to turn their camera off if they're not actively participating in the conversation. And when you want to join the circle, you can put a message in the chat and we will invite you to turn your camera off so that it's comfortable for everyone to sort of witness and be on the virtual outer circle. You can go on the top right side of your screen. You should have a little view button. And if you click on this button, you can hide non-video participants. This way you will be in a room where basically the first circle is the only one that's visible. I hope this isn't too confusing. Is it okay for everyone? Can I get thumbs up or down? Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Simon, I'm going to hand over to you to give maybe some grounding questions and some more directions, and then I think we can open the fishbowl.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Audrey. That's great explanation of fishbowl. Great. Before we actually start the fishbowl itself, I just wanted to give everybody a chance to ask any kind of factual questions, which just to make sure that everybody is with us, everybody to make sure we're all engaged in this, and to make sure that we're all in the same field, if you like, in the same sphere, using our kind of using Victor's nice word there. So the topic which we're talking about, and I think it's really important to realize that this is the first of a quite extensive series. We've got 15 at the moment, topic areas. So we are trying to focus around this particular area. So it's a very reasonable question right now. If you want to ask very briefly any particular questions about what we are talking about, to make sure that we're actually in the same field, in the same sphere, and let's just do that for a couple of minutes. See what you know. Please raise your hand if you want to ask. Turn your camera on, and then we'll just answer really quickly, and perhaps we'll turn back to Steve and Brad, particularly as our initiators, to answer very briefly the questions, and then we'll move into the fishbowl after that. I'll leave that until we actually just finish we can recap when we finish these fundamental round of questions just to see, are we all engaged? Is my issue in scope? That's the real question here. So over to you. Please raise a hand if you've got any burning questions about the scope of the thing and how to participate. And if we haven't got any questions, that's fine as well. But I'll just leave it for you. Just leave a little space just in case anybody has any questions about this.
I'll dive in with I've slightly forgotten the exact wording of the question that we were discussing, so that's my mundane question.
Okay, I can just fill in there briefly. We're talking about ecosystem weaving and mapping, and that's just the title so far, the provisional title. And what we're doing today is we're trying to sense into the questions which emerge, the vital questions, as Steve has given us an example. We're trying to sense into those questions, and we'll come up with at the end of the session with some questions, or we'll go ahead and share them with you all afterwards. Is that okay? Does that help you, Liam? Great.
Okay, I think there is
Okay.
an echo of clarity in the room. So let's go. So I'm gonna ask everyone to turn their camera off except for Brad and Steve. And should we call someone else in the core circle? How about, well, here we go. Sharon and Nicole, you're still on. So you're officially part of the circle. Welcome. And I'll turn mine off as well. Great. And now everyone looks at each other in silence. I'm joking. So let's get started. I mean, I think Steve and Brad, you gave a really interesting and sort of diverse introduction. Steve, I loved your, I guess, more philosophical, I will say, and systemic approach to the question. And Brad, I guess you're obviously through your work, and especially right now with Regen Week, very hands-on. Nicole, I'd love to invite you to share a little bit. I mean, you're part of many projects, Serenity and Regen Tribe are some of them. And I'm sure you have quite a few things to say about, well, yeah, those, again, questions that are live for you today. And I think we can really go at it from different angles, right? Steve, I really liked how you brought in the question of the barriers, right? We're here as a community, we all have a fairly similar vision of where we want to go. So this is also really a space for us to co-create and collaborate on how we can move things forward. I'll leave it to you, Nicole.
Sorry, my audio doesn't always pick up, so I hear what is said. So, but I think, you know, in this lack of structure, there's like questions that we want to explore, like big questions around ecosystem mapping and addressing what I feel is like scatteredness. It manifests in the resources that people have, that manifests in the databases people are building. You know, there's redundancy. People are building the same lists of the same resources and databases. People are mapping organizations, and you know, I personally see all these like beautiful visual representations and a map of this and a map of that. And even as hot a topic as decentralization is, I am actually in favor when it comes to data, and being aware, like even just being in this room is a privilege, because I like hearing people from organizations that I esteem really highly. But when it comes to data, I want like the ecosystem mapping to be more centralized and be more readily available. This is part of like, I know quite a few people who are in this initiative of like mapping ecosystems, and it's very much part of understanding, right? Like a first step of permaculture is to observe and to understand. And so to understand regeneration, like we have to make observations about the current situation and where we're going. But what I would like to see personally is solutions on bringing it into a togetherness. Although maybe that doesn't mimic nature, you know, like nature pops up in all sorts of different niches. So that's kind of what I want to pose to you, is like the more centralization of data and obviously accessibility to everyone, but collecting knowledge and sharing it as rapidly as possible is one way that I see as like a solution that I'm really focused on. And I'm curious to, like, Steve, with your background in tech, how you see this applying.
Yeah, great. Great questions. I spent a lot of my career at Fortune 500 companies. When I was at a large telecommunications company, we did an inventory of their application portfolio. They had 1,000 different applications they used to run their business, and they had customer information in more than 200 of those databases. So it was extraordinarily expensive and frankly impossible to keep them all synchronized. So managing large data sets, especially in large environments, has kind of been at the heart of a lot of what I did. I don't see Fortune 500 companies on the forefront of the evolutionary shift, however. And so as I sensed into my role, I felt like at a global level, we have all these people that are doing work. And just as large corporations figured out they needed a shared platform to foster sharing and better communication, I felt like a large platform was what the evolutionary shift movement needed. However, we needed to do it in a way that it was not subject to top-down control. And so I do think decentralized technologies are key. But then you bring up the challenge, Nicole, of, okay, but then how can we share data in this decentralized world? And I've been inspired by patterns of living systems, and in particular, living cells and cell membranes, and the notion of membranes. Because at the same time that we want to share data widely, there's some sensitive data. There's lack of trust that's only getting magnified and worsened through AI. There's a lot of different actors in the world. So kind of the vision that I'm trying to manifest is one in which we can come together in communities of trust, relatively small, and create membranes, and then link between the membranes to create larger membranes. But every contribution of data is stewarded, and its provenance is endorsed by a trust network, right? So we're basically ratcheting trust to global scale is the thought. The other key aspect I would say is it's a person-centric architecture as opposed to an application or provider-centric architecture. Like the large applications that are out on the internet today, whether it be from Amazon or Google or LinkedIn or eBay or even social networks that are aspire to foster collaboration and strong values. The center seems to be around the application. So for example, if I'm in a group and I need to contribute in Hilo, and I'll create that group in Hilo, I'll create that group in Facebook, I'll create a group in Google, I'll create a group in LinkedIn, I'll create a group in blah, 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 because all these applications make the group subservient to the application. If you invert that model and say, make it agent-centric, and so that now we have one group and we can invite applications to participate in that group, it changes everything from a data sovereignty perspective, from a security perspective, and it provides the cells that then can be fractally composed into this global network. So in a nutshell, that's how I would try to respond.
Fascinating.
I would ask if that landed for you. I mean, did that make sense?
Definitely. Actually, I wanted to pass it to Brad and on this idea of then grounding that in in-person events, like ecosystem mapping and how that manifests in in-person events.
Good question for me. And Steve, I don't know, every time you open your mouth, I think it's me talking. So I say I don't produce events, I build intentional trust networks. And I do believe that's this whole, during COVID, I was living up in Northern California, producing events the whole time. And this whole virtual event syndrome that we were forced into was just this idea of online community. I don't know any of you. I see your bios on the chat and I see your names, but we're not, our hearts and minds are only limited through this digital technology, how deeply we connect. So I like to say I do in-person events, and I'm committed to that. I've done over 1,000 of them in my career. And I do believe that's where the essential nature of trust is established, where we're heart to heart, we're in a connected space that allows us to really, it's the circle, the circle technology. What's the most important technology on the planet? It's the circle. It's what humanity was based on. It's where we draw our most connected possibility by sitting around a circle, around a fire, and speaking into the center of that circle, which represents the shared luminal consciousness of that group. This is we're in the digital fire right now. This is we're sitting around a fire pit, but it's digitally. And but it has a sort of a lower frequency than sitting in person. So, in establishing any kind of network, and I've looked at building decentralized networks, Steve, and how do you build chapters, and how do you build this fractal whole, and it's not easy. It's not easy mainly because there's so many other events and other organizations that we're all involved with, right? I'm involved in 10 different groups, and I'm part of 10 different online networks, and really what I believe is missing is that centralization. I think someone mentioned centralization earlier. I think it's critical that a network has a shared experience, and then people may not live in the same geo or bioregion, but at least they've had a shared experience together. Once they've had a shared experience together, it magnifies the potentiality of using technology. And again, technology is just a tool. It's only going to be as good as the container that is set, and that container will certainly be helped through different facilitation techniques that help establish that shared intention that I spoke about earlier, but also a shared value system and a shared culture. Because without those things, then we're basically just kind of heads thinking about things rather than really feeling them and really deeply connected. So hopefully that makes sense.
May I interject something, Brad? We all are familiar with Kardashev scale, how to see different type of civilizations and their evolvement. I came up with a theory, which I built a scale based on the evolution of consciousness. And so throughout history, a circular consciousness is closed. So you have the circle, which provides security. So also say it's predatory, competition, sicknesses, and lack of resources. I've shared with you in the chat an article I wrote about how spiral consciousness evolves. It's when we don't have these limitations anymore. And then you see like type 1, 2, and 3 civilizations and etc. When the consciousness as individuals and of course as a society evolves from planetary to solar and galactic and so on. So this is something I wish to say, that if we talk about technology, or say we want to rise our collective consciousness and transform, right? Then you see in spiral dynamics, for example, different groups have different collective goals, the definition of trust and whom do I trust? Like, yeah, I want the world to be a better place, but at the lower part, it's like just for my family or my tribe. And yeah, so that's brings us to ask the question, yes, how we can invite more to this gathering of tribe, to see that, you know, we are all one. And yes, I also believe that technology is an extension of our consciousness. It's part of the solution. And again, like, there are currently limitations in the AI development, and like, and you know, how can we overcome them? Like, how we can make AI systems more robust, explainable, and align with human values, and maybe even to surprise us in regards of our values. Yeah, the ethical considerations, like in regards of also AI development. This is what, like, I ask myself now, like grappling with issues like around privacy, bias, and potential impact of AI on employment. This is something also that I believe all of us are reflecting on daily. And yeah, when we talk about global collaboration as a challenge, and we open this as a question, so like, again, how this can be fostered through AI, and not everybody is trying to do the same and mapping instead of really working together. So I see it involves not just technological collaboration, but also like real people, like you are doing, like real physical people meeting together, looking in the eyes, and but also policy coordination among different countries, because it's not just about individuals. It's also, you know, when we talk about the whole of humanity, yes. So still there are countries. It's not like the biorealm map and no borders, not yet. And yeah, and yeah, I would also talk about future scenarios, because this is, I believe, what we are trying to raise here. Like, again, like plausible future scenarios for me in AI development. So it's not just, again, technological collaboration in solving global crisis like climate change and so on, but also the risks when we develop this artificial general super intelligence. Yeah, so yeah, that's my maybe.
Good questions. Good.
Yes, I'm just going to take a moment to repeat and rephrase back the major questions that I've heard posed so far. So in the beginning, it was, how do we accelerate this shift? How can we use technology to ethically support this shift? How do we ground digital communities into physical ones, where, as Brad says, our hearts and minds meet? How can we manage large data sets that empower the shift? And how can we make these technological ecosystems more robust? So those are some of the questions that I think are kind of percolating, and I can provide these later. I just wanted to make note in a really practical sense of, like, the Gathering of Tribes is an event, right? An in-person event, meant not to just kind of talk about these questions, but answer them and provide solutions to them, and even embody them. With Anton from Rebuild, we've been working on this idea of a different type of event that incorporates all the pros of a conference, a festival, a gathering, a retreat, and melds it into one, where there are a lot of pros and cons to each structure of these types. And I'd love to share that format with actually Victor and Audrey for the organizing purposes. But just a reminder that, you know, coming together would be embodiment and the answer and the solution to these questions. So I'm going to pop out of the fish bowl so someone else can pop in.
Thank you, Nicole.
Great. Thanks very much. I'm a bit hesitant to be here, but then nobody else is here to represent murmuration. So I thought I'd just put in a few questions and then just leave again. But I know Steve knows about murmurations, but maybe not everybody else does. It's a protocol which Sylvester Bradley's been working on and a team for a few years now, and it's doing this sort of mapping in a very decentralized way, but in a centralized, decentralized way by providing a common protocol. So basically, people put up their own information and maintain their own information in a format which can be sucked up by any aggregator and then displayed on a map. That's basically how it works. And my questions, I think, around this, the questions that I would raise around the ecosystem weaving and mapping are threefold. The first is, how do we actually persuade people to come together on that kind of combined decentralized approach to sharing mapping information? Secondly, it's all very well for organizations and things that need to be public, but a lot of people are less happy sharing personal information. And I think my sense, very strong sense, is that this is not going to work very well for mapping individual people. A different way of doing that. And I think the third one is to do with the overwhelm potential of information. If you map everything and you just give people a huge sort of maps to look through or huge lists to scan through, it's not really going to help people find the right people effectively. And that's really what I'm interested in, I guess. So I'll just put that in there and jump out again, I guess.
Thank you, Simon. Go for it, Steve. And I'm before you answer, I'm not supposed to be doing this, but after you answer, Steve, I'm gonna ask other people to join in, just because I know we have amazing 16 awesome organizations and about 20 minutes left. So I'm very curious to hear other people. But Steve, please.
Yeah, well, there's already a lot of richness in the conversation, but I think I'll pick up on how do we get people to come together in the mapping exercise, and for that I tie it back to what Brad was saying earlier about shared purpose, shared values. I tend to look at the pro-social core design principles because they are abstracted from actually observing at what works and not some theory. They're, what are the principles that groups that have successfully created collaboration and co-creation, or what principles do they exhibit? And the number one on that list is clarity around shared purpose. And so I think that's one. There's more, but I'll just leave it at that in the interest of time. I think also with respect to the architectures for sharing, we need to think outside the app, basically, is my message. I also think that security needs to be, and data sovereignty needs to be baked into the core of the infrastructure, so that as, to take the concrete problem of, we've got 47 people out there, let's say, creating maps, and many of the same people in organizations are going to show up in each of those maps. To me, that's because we got the center of gravity wrong. I should be able to register myself as an individual and my organizations once, and be the stewards of my information, and then be able to share that, right? So if anything changes in my profile, individually, organizationally, I change it once, and it can be available to others. Now, how does that scale, and how do, you know, I don't want to share sensitive data with everybody. So that's where we need these containers of fractally composed groups, right, that have membranes of membership, and shared purpose is part of what I would call, each group has what I would call a mimetic signature. It sort of defines the values, the governance model, the principles, the purpose, and so forth. Why are we bound together? What are we trying to achieve together? And participation in that membrane requires alignment with that mimetic signature. And that can lead to an architecture in which we don't have this proliferation, this, you know, massive redundancy. What we have is controlled sharing through larger and larger trust networks.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm gonna put people on the spot because everyone is being shy. So, Nenad, how do you feel about putting your camera on, because you're sharing some really interesting stuff in the comment section?
And Dave is there already, so let Dave have a little let Dave say his piece.
Great.
Thanks. And besides that, you don't have a beard. You're not allowed.
You're not on the team.
Okay, I was just prompted by pro-social core design principles because I'm a pro-social facilitator. So I just shared a handout in chat.
Thank you.
Well, I was trying to resist jumping in, but I'm very excited about the conversation, and it's things that I'd like to be involved in and like to contribute to. So you know, please put me on the team however you need. And I was resonating a lot with what you were saying, Steve. I feel like it's not exactly a shared purpose, but an overlapping purpose. People have their own purposes, and we want them to be able to co-create. And so I think of it like we built the internet once. You know, how do we use that same kind of methodology to build this, the regenerative future? And I feel like the internet kind of was put together by a bunch of people working from different perspectives, improving in their own space, but the space is linked together with some coherence. And so it's the coherence that's you know, I think a lot of the problems, and that's where you need the standards and things like that. And I guess so that's one thing, is I don't feel like it's one purpose, but there's overlapping purposes. And also that I feel like one version of the ecosystem, people talk about ecosystem mapping a little bit, and I'm kind of interested in it, but I do get a little frustrated with the notion. And I wonder if, in some sense, if you just follow the code, if you follow the assets, the ecosystem reveals itself. And so in trying to think about a landscape, a stack for landscape regeneration, it turns out there are many different groups investing in that space already. And you can track them because they've created value that is available in some form. And so we were better at kind of, you know, mapping that value map, then that may help us into, you know, seeing the stack as it's developing and helping to make it more coherent. But that's probably like nudges and stuff, right? So there's not a master map. There's probably just nudges and pushes. That was it. But thanks so much for all this stuff. It's really wonderful.
Hello, everyone. I was just, while listening, because you're talking about mapping, but not so much in which scale. So trying to get kind of something in a global scale, when for me somehow it's a bit more interesting, this idea of a guild in the local region. So as an example, if we think like, who contributes to the development of a child in a community? You know, the family, the father, mother, and the uncles, and then the teacher, and then the neighbors, and then who benefits for the development and that child becoming a fully functioning citizen and contributing to the society. So there are many other indirect ways in which the child contributes to the whole of society. And this becomes a bit easier to see with this idea of a guild. So instead of a huge, okay, let's connect this child to the whole world. What is the, of course it benefits the world at a larger scale, but somehow the question that comes for me from reflecting this is kind of, how could the gathering of the tribes or events that we bring people together like this can supporting this development of the people who come to it to really embody these practices and be able to shift or influence their local scale.
Yeah, I'll jump in again, but I don't want to. I want to leave room for Brad and others as well. Yeah, I think the change is bottom up and inside out, and I think place-based organization is critical. You know, Brad was referring to the richness of face-to-face interactions. Well, face-to-face interactions when you're living in a shared space, especially with a focus on the local landscape and the needs of the local landscape. That's the building blocks, and that will naturally bring the coherence. You don't necessarily need a lot of mapping. You just need to meet your neighbors and get to know your watershed or your land, right? But I think like what Joe Brewer is doing is trying to build a network of to map these different landscape leaders, to share best practices, to share success stories, to commiserate over failures, and basically to support one another. So I think that starting with, and I think the Guild has a long history of success in sort of layered mentorship and how to bring gifts into fruition with some mastery. So yeah, I think the Guilds are an important part of that. The other thing I will say in response to what we shared previously, yeah, I don't think we need to get everybody in the world to agree on a shared purpose. That's actually kind of a scary thought. I think that's what fascism is is about. We all have our own calling, right? We all have our own sense of what's needed. And when we find others that have shared purpose, then we can form bonds. And it could be shared purpose around a local landscape. It could be shared purpose around a guild, you know, sort of layered skills. Some purposes, so those can form the basis for small groups, and then those groups may find a larger shared purpose that draws them together in alignment. I'm going to close with just two thoughts about how do we cohere action at global scale, right? Well, we have an example of one way to do it. If you look at multinational corporations, they are able to marshal a really high degree of coherence on a global scale. And they do it from top down, you know, essentially dominator culture, coercion, right? If we're going to do it bottom up, then the top down, by the way, deprives us of the creative imagination, the creative expression of many, many people, either because they're too oppressed by the dominator culture and they just, you know, they're looking where the next meal is coming from or how to put shelter overhead, or because they're in service to whatever the leader's vision is that's being disseminated from the top down. So there's enormous potential we can unlock if we could find a way to tap into the creative, innovative capacity of people from the bottom up. But then how do we bring coherence? And it's not by top-down coercion, it's by shared aspirational drawing us up, right? So this is why I think the shared purpose is so important. And it's a cascade of shared purposes. It's an ecosystem of shared purposes, if I can mix metaphors. That draw us upwards into alignment, right? Rather than imposed alignment from below. So that's in a nutshell my vision of how we get coherence at global scale is through shared aspiration.
Let me jump in on, and shared purpose maybe isn't it, but a shared vision of humanity might be. And right now, the shared vision of humanity is awfully ominous. And the world is changing dramatically. We've all gotten very comfortable living in our global world now. The internet and Facebook and other technology platforms have given us a sense of being a global citizen now. I meant, when I was growing up, I didn't know anybody who lived in Europe. Now I have friends all over the world. I mean, it's amazing. Every country, I can go travel and visit anybody in any country now. And that didn't happen before the last, really for me, the last 4 or 5 years. And actually Rebuild was one of those people, one of those ways that I got to meet a lot of people around the world. So it is through some of these architectures that we are developing. But as you said, Joe, Brewer's kind of going about it. As the world is changing, it's going to be less global. We're going to travel less. We're going to wind up being much more about our local bioregions. Our food supply, our supply chains are going to become more localized. They're going to have to, because the global supply chains are breaking down. Obviously, food on a global level is ridiculous, and we should have our own local food systems. And everything about that is about driving us into a more back towards a more agrarian geographical, existence. We're not going to jump on planes every second. I don't think we will. And we may have these experiences where we're online with people all over the world, and that does have its advantages. But again, as we said, it doesn't go deep enough. So I'd like to say that there's everybody. I'm surprised no one, Victor from Gaia Earth, is on this call, because they're building probably the best database of new thought leaders, regenerative thought leaders. They've got somewhere around 1,500. And if you don't know it, it's GaiaNet.earth, GaiaNet.earth. Check it out. But I don't even know what they're going to do with that network. They haven't even really formally activated it. They've been very intentional about building it. But the question is, what do you do with it? How do you actually utilize? And you use the word the global corporations. Well, GaiaNet doesn't have any money. So these global corporations can do whatever they want in terms of building, a network of product sales people all over the world, because they have huge capital. I mean, capitalism has actually allowed them to do that. I like to say, I was doing this conference called Tribalize, and I never made money doing it for 7 years. It wasn't because of lack of trying. It's because it's a scarce economy. People in the community business are leaving the matrix world. They're actually not making a lot of money, so they're living in a different kind of reality base. And that has a lot to do with what's happening in the exterior world is going to kind of reshape how we build our tribes. I really do think that, when the dinosaurs existed, tribes existed for protection and safety. And then the dinosaurs were gone, and maybe tribes developed for other reasons after the dinosaurs were gone, right? So what's happening in society is going to reshape our networks. It's going to reshape the way we come together. And it may actually be out of survival. I hate to say that. I'm not a gloom and doom guy, but I'm also a realist, and I'm paying attention to what's happening on this planet, holding an optimistic view as much as I can. And these conversations with Victor that I've been having about building these kinds of structures are paramount to giving us a resource network, both information and even legitimately real resources to fall back on if there is a collapse in our civilization, if capitalism does collapse. So I hope some of that makes sense. Anybody else want to jump in?
Oh, somebody had
Victor.
their hand up.
Victor's on camera.
Yeah,
Come on.
maybe I would like to jump in. Thank you, everybody. I would like to explore and maybe in the last minute throw a few other ideas into the conversation. And that's we're talking about ecosystem mapping, but then ecosystem of what? I love this idea of guilds because it's actually something I experimented a little bit and will be experimenting in the future. I think the organizations which we are going to have and see in the regenerative society will be very different structure from the existing corporate job. Like you have one job and it's a modern version of slavery. You're part of one company. We're already seeing this where people who work remotely or people who work in the gig economy naturally work on many things. It's becoming more and more normal to work on many things, but it's wonderful, it's freedom. But then you discover, where is your support network? Where is your long-term personal professional development? And this is something that I think tribes need to provide. So I think there will be a whole, as society transitions to new ways of work and to regenerative ways of living, there will be a fundamental shift in the kinds of organizations. And we see the mental health crisis, and to me it is indubitable that one part of that is because we've broken down a huge number of structures, from extended family, tribe, community. People have mentioned neighborhood, and right now we're left with immediate family, which is often one parent, one child, and the state. Those are your two forms of belonging. That's not enough. We need other forms of belonging. For me, and this is my definition, I like to think of a tribe as a unit where you feel a sense of belonging, which is bigger than you, and yet small enough that you can see your impact and contribution. And I think we need that. I'm part of something bigger than me that will continue past me, and yet I can see my contribution. A country is not that. So that's one idea which I think is really interesting to think about. What are we mapping? And then the other idea is value flows, right? In many ways, what's more important and interesting is the interrelationships between the nodes, right? Your brain is not the neurons, it's the connections between the neurons that make it work. And what is that's flowing in these connections? I really believe that the strength and power and why the regenerative ecosystem is inevitable is that we're able to connect and work together through many more dimensions of value exchange than just money. It's natural human way, learning, love, support, this, that, and in a regenerative world, I believe we can do this between organizations in a much richer way than the existing system will ever be able to. And that's what's going to be really interesting. So I really think we need to think about, what is it that we're mapping and how do these things connect? And the whole point of the gathering of tribes, Connect for Action, and by connect we mean at all of the levels, is to enable more of these flows to happen.
I'm struck to share this this redefinition of survival of the fittest. Darwin's definition was hierarchical, but the new definition, the regenerative definition, is survival of the fittest means fitting in to your community, to your circle, to your group. And that is what's going to give you your safety, your protection, your expression of your soul purpose by fitting in with a community. That's going to give you survival into the future. I hope you guys can assimilate that into your work.
But one of the definition to ecology, it's about the relationship between the organisms and themselves, and between themselves to the environment in a time frame. So it makes sense. And also, as social beings, it's not about us evolving in the way we communicate in large numbers, but also perfecting our communication in small communal structures. As social beings, we have the need to be seen, to belong, and this sense of purpose. And it's always around this. You see, like all the big platforms like Facebook, they rose through the idea that we want to be seen, but now instead of just seen by your family and close friends, suddenly the whole world see you. And now you see how these big organizations are appealing the need for us to belong. So, you know, it's all around communities. I think that the great big leap will be around a purpose-driven economy. And obviously, all of those, they are our social needs for each and every one of us to fit in. Yeah, and so as you said, survival of the fittest. And this is how we are. And I could see AI humanoids joining these our daily lives and family structures. It's a big topic to discuss. You know, like I'm running such circles around the topic unconditional love, right? This is parents, but we all seek for unconditional friendship, right? This is why we love cats and dogs so much. For example, we know that we never
Companionship.
yes, unconditional companionship. So this is something, imagine, we could achieve with these robot humanoids. And again, it raises many questions, but yeah, that's something I wanted to bring in as an open question.
Go for it, Nicole.
I'm really stuck still on what Victor asked around what we're mapping. If the gap is between the family unit and the state, I just want to propose as a final thought then what the in-between of what we're mapping includes like kinship identities. You could say this is like people who believe in regeneration as a type of kinship identity. Organizations, which may or may not be also a business, but I know that Victor and Audrey and everyone, they're involving businesses and formal organizations in the event. And then nations and networks would be kind of the same tier, like the three tiers that I see existing in between just the individual family or individual, because I am my own household, right? That is what I see that we're mapping and what we're bringing together. And by coordinating between kinship identities, organizations and businesses, and then these emerging networks and nations, because we're in such an interesting time where like government is not as fluid as we might have previously thought. Like nation identities, the same way like crypto broke and created its own type of decentralized economy where anyone can create value and then create something to represent that value. People are creating their own societies and micronations and states that exist parallel to the existing governments, but meet our own needs in our own ways and according to our shared ethos. And knowing that everyone in this room shares that ethos of regeneration and living more intentionally, and the shift, as I've been referring to in this conversation, like those are the types of groups that we need to bring together and coordinate between to answer these problems.
Thank you, Nicole. I think those are perfect closing words. Actually, it's 7:21, so I just want to invite everyone who is still here, but I don't think we lost anyone, which is a good sign, to turn their camera back on. And to close out, I would like everyone, I think we have time, to just share the one question that came alive for you in this session. It might be a question that you had at the start already. It might be something that you really resonated with as those people who were in the core circles were sharing, or it might be something that came alive in the chat, which was beautifully active throughout the session. I think we're missing some cameras, but it's okay. Okay, great. We have Krista. Okay, I'm gonna call people. No, actually, I'm gonna call the first person, and then I will ask you to share your question and ask the next person. Victor is making a face. Victor, go for it.
I think it's easier if you call people. It'll be
Yeah, you just call people, Audrey.
Yeah, it's not bossy, but fine. Nicole, you can start. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
What's the question? I was typing.
The question is, what is the question that really came alive for you today?
Mm. I know a lot of questions emerge, but now I'm interested with the kind of final realization that I just had around once we map it, what do we do with that information? Like, so we have this information at our fingertips. There's awareness of what's out there. What do we choose to do next? That's sort of what's lingering on my mind. Call on someone else.
Thank you, Nicole. Steve.
Yeah, boiling it down to one question. I actually think there's many more levels than 3 between the individual and global scale. And really it's how do we scaffold these mesoscale structures? How do we build these networks of trust? I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Brad?
I think it's been an incredibly interesting dialogue, maybe a little scattered at times, but really a lot of good wisdom shared. Thanks, everybody. I think it's a natural evolution for consciousness to merge. If we really are all one, then what does that merging look like? Is it going to look like singularity, or is it going to look like nature? And that's the big question that I think we have a choice point to make. Are we moving towards a technocratic version of civilization? Or are we going to be living more closely again with nature and connecting more with each other and with nature? That's my deep inquiry today.
Thank you. Beautiful. Rob? We haven't heard your voice today. Can't see you.
Yeah, it's here. I keep coming with the same question, which of course it's not going to be answered. For me, it was all the wisdom here. It can all happen, and we can work it out. But what's stopping it? What needs to be removed so that the natural wisdom of the ground up can do its thing? Which of course would bring many other questions about we're not educated, so we wouldn't remember how to do it and all this blah blah blah. We make a right mess. But for me, it would be how to remove this education influence tendencies we've been indoctrinated into from the top down way, and really come into the wisdom of the ground up. This would be my questions. Yeah.
Thank you. All very beautiful. Simon?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, what's really hit me new for me is the question of how do we map belonging? Because that's really, really interesting. And these different people have just mentioned different areas of belonging and different scales of belonging. How do we map belonging?
Beautiful. Nenad?
Yeah, for me, given the ambition of gathering of tribes, the question is who is not here?
We are
Great
here.
question. I think the women are not really here. Like, we need more, but yeah.
Definitely.
David?
I ended up thinking, I mean, I kind of feel a lot of times you shouldn't pay attention to what people say. You should pay attention to what they do. And I'm wondering if that works with ecosystem mapping. If we map what people are doing, do we end up with something interesting and useful? So.
Wow, amazing question. Liam?
I find myself wondering, is there a data structure that is really elegant and simple that would capture some of the nested hierarchy, some of the scales of that, and also this apparent incongruity between place-based local and global cyber tribes? Like, if we could find a really simple data structure, usually make a very simple app. It would be a fun, playful experiment. So that's what I'm thinking about quite a bit today.
Thank you. Krista?
I feel I'm a totally newbie here. And all the questions that came up were actually mentioned. For me, it's about belonging, how to find really what belonging is enough. This is probably not the best way to describe it. And Rob said something about removing. For me, it's what is this tip that leads to transformation? Not how to unlearn, but what is this little bit that will just turn around the whole?
Thank you. Igor?
I usually try to bring it with this state of being. So the question is how to support that. How can we support the embodiment of regenerative practice in our peers in a way that inspire our local tribes?
Thank you. Beautiful. Sharon?
Yeah, so a side note to all talk about mapping, just remember that Columbus, he had a map before he went on his exploration, and all the other great explorers. And my question is how to build a collaborative framework supported by AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, to pioneer a new era in human history. Yeah.
Powerful. Thank you. Victor?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's how do we map the relationships and the flows?
Thank you. I didn't think about my question. I really come back to this element of, yeah, how do we harness the collective energy, power, and intelligence of this? Like, I'm amazed at what is just in this room now. And if we take the wider ecosystem, there's so much more. So what are the blockers? Why aren't we there yet? What do we need to do? Yeah. So I know there's more people in the room, but some of them are hiding. I'm just calling in the ones that have their camera on. If anyone who has their camera off wants to jump in and speak now, please do so. Okay, so it's 7:31. We're almost right on time. Just remains for me to say a huge thank you to all of you. Special thanks to Steve and Brad for beautifully initiating and activating this conversation with your knowledge. Thank you so much, Simon and Victor and the whole team for all your work and everyone for this beautiful co-creation. So as we said at the start, this was the first episode of a long series. The next one will take place in 2 weeks on Wednesday at the same time, and we will be focusing on regenerative communications, media, and storytelling. And we will have some great initiators and regen organizations and individuals as well. So yeah, stay tuned. We will keep sharing the links onto our channels. And Simon, yeah, please.
And thank you so much, Georgie, for being totally on the ball and facilitating, doing the really main part of the facilitating. Thanks so much. Great work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Audrey. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful evening. See you soon. That's out.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.